Welcome to Bull Strong. I am Craig Nadeau, and today I'm with a couple of friends of mine. I'm with Tom and Gerri, not cartoon characters, but excited to have them both here. And welcome to the show, you guys.
Thanks.
I get to see you in the mornings sometimes, and now I get to see you at work.
Terrific. Yeah. No, it's gym buddies. That's what we are.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, thanks for coming. So I think part of the reason we are getting together is that we have lots of conversations while we're at the gym or just kind of offline. And we thought we'd grab some of that and see if we could put something together, have a good conversation about what's going on in the world today. So, Tom, tell us about yourself.
Well, I grew up in Saskatchewan. I'm a farm boy and graduated from the university in Saskatchewan. So I'm a Rough Rider fan too. And from there, traveled to Edmonton, got a job with Novecosky Transmission as an engineer. And from there, I met my wife, Mary Lee. We came to Calgary. We had 2 children, and I've got a dog, and work out on a regular basis. I have a real estate company that I developed probably about 20 years ago, I'd say, mostly based on apartment buildings, buying existing assets, and sometimes we develop.
Excellent. Excellent. I'm going to edit out most of that. Thanks. And Gerri.
Thanks for sharing.
None of it was true, actually.
Thanks for sharing, Tom. Appreciate that. My name's Gerri. I'm actually started off as a geologist and then went back to school and got a business degree and been in sales and marketing for most of my professional career. I was born in Calgary, so we're coming at you straight from Calgary, and there's probably not many Calgarians actually here. I don't know, Craig, if you're originally from here.
Nope, Ontario.
So I was born in Calgary and moved around a lot as a kid, but landed back in Calgary about 14 years ago and loving it.
Excellent. Yeah.
Likely a Stampeder fan. I have no...
actually, no, Tom. Sorry about that.
Oh, nice.
Oiler fan, by the way.
Really?
That's not football.
High five on the Oilers.
Oh, really? Oh.
Well, I grew up in Edmonton mostly, so I was there. I was there during the City of Champions. Before Edmonton became gateway to Fort McMurray.
I
Part of my growing
sign.
up, Craig was in Edmonton as well, and I was there during that heyday time.
Were you really?
So, yeah.
Oh. Were you in like a university there, or what were you doing?
Yeah, I went to university, U of A.
When were you in university there? We probably passed in the hallway.
Yes, we may very well have. I was graduated geology in 85.
Okay, so I was just going into school then. So.
Well, then I was then my MBA. I graduated 89.
Oh, okay.
So we might have been there at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was in there. Yeah, from 85 through 89. So cool. Yeah, I was at the U of A. I did Bachelor of Arts.
Well,
so artistic.
Let's work on that artistic side. It's left brain thinking.
Nothing.
Is that where your working out started, in the gyms of Edmonton?
Yeah. Yeah, I was there. And actually, if you will afford me the short story, I was heavily into track and field. And that was my thing. And I'd been doing track and field since I was probably a preteen and like competitively. And then got into it pretty seriously. And then through high school, I was on teams and we trained a lot at the university. And my brother was an exceptional high jumper and I was more of the decathlete crowd. And so we kind of folded into the university training environment early on. And so my brother and I both had the same coaches for the most part. And we trained in the Butter Dome, if you remember the Butter Dome. And we were doing weights there right from day one. So long time ago.
I remember a gym there in Edmonton. It was Thor's.
I never went to Thor's. Because we didn't have to.
Right.
So it was convenient. So and I got to Mark will never call me out on this, Mark Messier, but we used to train together on Wednesdays in the Butterdome doing stairs. And so he would go do stairs occasionally, and I didn't watch hockey. I knew who he was, but I could care less. So we just did stairs. And that guy, he was a kid then. His chest was like,
he's a brick. Yeah, his number was 11, and I loved 11. I wore 11 also in hockey. Yeah.
Yeah. One time, Dave Semenko was, if you guys remember Dave.
Cement.
Yeah.
Head.
Yeah. And so he was going to do a charity boxing with Muhammad Ali. And so he was training at once at the same time. So
and it didn't happen,
crazy.
though.
Oh, yeah, it did. Yeah.
It did?
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, you have to look it up.
That's got to be on
You
YouTube.
fact checked me.
Okay, it's a nice factoid you brought in there.
Yeah. Yeah, it was Edmonton. And Edmonton's growing up a lot. So in some ways beating up Calgary.
Yes.
Maybe that's an open door too. How's Calgary doing? What's Calgary look like from your guys' perspective?
Well, I'd like to bring that Edmonton-Calgary thing to the discussion here, Craig, because part of my growing up was Edmonton, and now living in Calgary, and being from Calgary, it's interesting in that my perspective is interesting when it comes to Calgary, I think, in that Calgary rides so high and low when it comes to oil and gas. Mm-hmm. When things are flying high, Calgary is just running high, and when it's low, it's low. And so, recently, and just even in the last 5 or 10 years, we've seen the ups and downs before COVID. And Edmonton, I see less of that in Edmonton. I see the much more level, and then it then also I think speaks to some of the paradigm and the people here. I think in Calgary, it's a lot of show, and it's a lot of, hey, we got this big project, and let's go buy the Lamborghini.
Mm-hmm.
Edmonton, it's not. They have money, but it's not the same. I think it's not as flashy. So it's Calgary. I think looks at or wants to be perceived as that. Look at us. We're a tier 1 city. We're this. We're that. We're highfalutin. And Edmonton, I think, has a different feel, a different perspective. So. When I look at that and I say, well, how's Calgary doing? And to answer your question, it's like, well, oil and gas, like you were saying earlier, Tom, oil and gas is not flying right now, and people aren't moving into Alberta and Calgary specifically. So what drives this economy is going to be interesting moving forward.
Well, and it's arts degrees include economics degrees, which is where I landed. So we just landed in my home base. So one of the interesting things I think about, when you look at the Edmonton-Calgary dialectic is really Edmonton has the stable business environment, and like think back, it had AGT, Alberta Government Telephones, which is now TELUS and whatnot. And then it always had, the big oil and gas service stuff was always there because it was moving northward, right? And so Calgary economically was the place to be because it had a lot of things that Ralph Klein put here, which was, good tax environments. The rent was dirt cheap. Calgary's had dirt cheap rent from the beginning of time downtown. And then it had a good, Calgary had a pretty reasonable business environment, and you could get around easy, and it wasn't too big of a city, and it was clean. But Edmonton's stable, and there's a big difference. Yeah.
So one of the things we have, my company has apartment buildings in Edmonton, so I see a lot of dynamics in Edmonton. And so Gerri mentioned, highfalutin Calgary, let's say. Well, I find that Edmonton's more your workhorse, more of your stable, solid, I guess, worker that is going to work, putting his 8 to 10 hours in, coming home, and making it happen. Here we kind of give that directive. I find in Calgary, you've got the towers, you've got the executives, engineers, you name it, and then I find that it kind of gets, I guess, initiated almost from Edmonton. Think of it as a starting point almost, and it's your gateway to the north. So we see activity there and all kinds of activity. And so, however, right now we're not seeing job growth. We're not seeing people coming to Alberta as such. And although I've seen it in Red Deer. We have assets there too. So I've seen people moving from Vancouver, a number
Is that
of
right?
people actually.
To Red
And-
Deer.
Yeah, and they're in the oil and gas industry, and
Wow.
they're phoning up. They're not even viewing the suite. They're just going, okay, well, I got a video, thanks. Nowadays, that's all you need, and yeah, I'll take it. And so that we have never seen really in the past too much, and but we are seeing it now.
Wow. To Red Deer. That's surprising, really. Red Deer always seemed like a place to get a burger.
Well, with Red Deer, there's not a ton happening, I don't think, in Red Deer, but they're situated there, and then they move on from there. They don't move on. They work from there. That's their base camp, let's call it. And then they work up in Fox Creek for 3 weeks or 4 weeks, and then they come back to Red Deer, where it's a little more affordable, and it's certainly more affordable there versus, say, Edmonton or next to Calgary.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges you have, in an environment that's highly technical, that is intellectually technical and not physically technical, right? If you get me. So you can have a CNC machine, someone's got to touch it to make it work, right? Whereas if I'm just going to draw a picture or a drawing, the thing that we've seen increasingly over the last 2 decades really is you don't need to be in Calgary or Edmonton or anywhere to do that. You can do that anywhere in the world, and I think that's caused a big drain in Calgary. We've definitely seen people move to where they want to be, not where the work is, because you can just take that work with you. But it's, we always talk in Alberta, you hear it so much, like we need to ramp up the IT environment. It's going to be the IT of the North. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see.
Well, so before you interject, Gerri, I saw you wanting to get in there. I just want to make a point. On the real estate side, you mentioned where people want to be. Well, just look at the Western Seaboard. Look at the cost of real estate, and then compare it, say, to Alberta. Then go to Saskatchewan. Then go to Manitoba, and you can see where people want to be. Where people want to be, that's what drives the prices. And so, you're right. Is it going to turn around here? I don't know. We can't change our geography for sure. So something else has to change, and people can work in Vancouver for a Calgary firm quite easily.
But Tom, to that point, like I agree with you, and it conceptually, rationally, it makes sense. But there are some things about Calgary that are a bit of an anomaly for me, and we were talking about it earlier off air here, in terms of the real estate market in Calgary. What's driving that? Or if you look at what the differences between Edmonton and Calgary, Edmonton perceives itself as being a tier 1 city, and it charges just simple things like parking. Parking is crazy expensive in Calgary compared to even New York or some of these tier 1 cities. So what justifies that? What justifies the cost of living in Calgary? Because we're not, in my view, we're not a New York, we're not in LA, but yet there's something in Calgary that leads us to say, well, yeah, we should be charging these parking rates or just basic cost of living, food, whatever it is, restaurants, whatever. And it's interesting to me that there's this dynamic that goes on in Calgary, and it's hard to explain it. And more recently, we're talking about real estate and what's driving the real estate market in Calgary. Because if we were really that destination city, people would be flocking here, and then that would justify the real estate market. I get it, but that's not the case. So I don't know what the dynamic is in Calgary here when it comes to that.
Yeah, when we talked to a bunch of the mayoral candidates before the last mayor campaign, and the thing that was consistent was that Calgary needs to be a destination place. We don't have a reason to come here yet, which is a little scary. And then we all talked about, well, Edmonton has the ice district. It's like a whole district. It's not even just like a thing. It's just like a whole area, and it's amazing. We don't even have that. So you have outsiders come to Calgary. What are they coming here for? Like, we don't have unbelievable convention space. We don't have our Saddle Dome's not amazing, whatever we call that environment. Our football environment's not great. We just don't have a draw.
So
other than the
Mother
mountains.
Nature, I think Mother Nature would be our draw.
But then you could land. I don't know if you could land at the airport, take the ring road, and you're out. You'd never hit Calgary.
Great.
So
That's
you
not
mentioned,
great.
yeah, you mentioned the landscape. What did you say, Gerri? Was it
Mother Nature?
Mother Nature. So you mentioned that. Brings to mind my wife. She does a ton of hiking, and it's funny how very few people actually go out hiking as close as we are, even to Banff. Going to Banff, how many? You take a poll. I think it's minimal. It's not a lot. So I don't know if that's a big draw, although it is a draw, I think. What I've seen in Edmonton is the infrastructure, number one. Unbelievable. You drive into Edmonton and you've got these overpasses, underpasses, and roads, and what they're doing, I think, is ultimately preparing and drawing these people in. So the ice district, they've made that work. That it's an interesting project because they've been able to do it with the public, with private investment, I think, and government. So they've made it work. They haven't done that yet here. So, and the retail, it's incredible, the retail that's in Edmonton compared to other places. I think it's even highest per capita, almost on square footage basis. So, and I don't have the numbers to quote right now, but it's interesting because you do need to be a leader, and you have to attract, as Craig is mentioning, I think, in those respects. So in any type of real estate, whether it's apartment buildings, you want to be, like for example, our business, we need to be a leader, to be different, to be attractive for a client to come. So you look at a city, well, there you go.
Yeah. And Gerri, you had said off camera before, like, where does the Indigenous, Alberta Indigenous crowd fit into this too? And they have I think they have a pretty big role to play. And when you start to look at the Grey Eagle Hotel environment, and then there's the whole, I don't even know what it's called, but down where Costco is, that area is going to explode. Like, it's going to be huge. And like, I don't know if you guys have been into they have a sports complex, which is amazing. Amazing. Seriously, you got to go see it.
Well, I know the Costco, you're talking the Costco area.
Yep.
Yeah. Mary just goes there.
Yeah.
It's only 15 minutes, I think, or something.
Yeah.
Like, it's so simple and fast. So these kinds of things, that's a great thing. And the complex you mentioned, is this a new complex?
Well, yeah, they have like a massive retail environment and residential there, and with like low rise, high rise. It's going to be a massive, massive environment. So it's going to be great.
Kind of going back to the conversation before, is that I started to wonder, is this a little bit of Field of Dreams where build it and they will come?
Yeah.
So it's a ice district, or it's a West Edmonton Mall, or whatever that is. And I realize that there's people on both sides of that fence in terms of should taxpayer dollars be used for that. But I realize that you have to hit it right. It's important to kind of make sure that you hit that at least pretty close. But what our conversation earlier got me thinking about should we be pushing that envelope a little bit more as a city to build it and they will come. And the most recent example is the new stadium, the new rink for the Flames, and that's been kiboshed recently, and so I'm sure they're looking at reinvigorating that discussion. But again, whether it's a hockey rink or a larger attraction like a West Edmonton Mall, what's going to be driving the Calgary economy, or at the very least, what's going to be the attraction to bring people from, whether it's BC or internationally.
Yeah. Well, and too, when you look at Vegas, like Vegas doesn't have like a vibrant mining community, or I guess it's outside of Vegas, but like people go to Vegas because it's a great place to go. It's kind of fun. It has lots of cool stuff. Are you going to come to Calgary for any of that? Like, I don't think so.
Well,
Not
we were
today.
just in Phoenix in November, I think, another couple, and we went there, and I was super excited about one thing, seeing an NBA game there.
Yeah.
And so we made an evening out of it. It was exciting. It was simple. They have a great facility there. The game was great. enjoyed it. So that is something that is part of the heartbeat of the cities and what drives them.
Yeah, in some ways, I think it's the fallacy in the argument of the ultra progressives is that if you're going to build an economy, you have to have a reason and purpose behind it. And so, like, you know, if you look at like a little town like Coaldale, you know, like they existed because of coal, hence the name. And you were there because there's coal. Why does Calgary exist today? Like, what's our purpose anymore? And like you have 30-40% of downtown is empty. So you remember, it wasn't that long ago. We all bragged about how many head offices we had in Calgary. Mm-hmm. And we were, another one came. Now that's off the radar. So why are people here? You know, and if you can, you know, this, I think COVID somewhat compounds it, because if you can get a job doing, you know, SharePoint development, but then you can move to Bahamas and do it remotely, you never have to be in Calgary. Calgary needs a reason right now. Like, we have a short window to get back to that.
You know, Craig, as you're saying that, I started to think about taking this a little further afield than even just Calgary. And so what drives the Canadian economy? Yeah. What's going to make us different? Because from my perspective, and I work at a company where we manufacture and construct things. And so can Canada are we afforded the luxury of saying, we're just going to be a service provider. We're just going to do this. We're not going to really manufacture things. We're just going to, you know, take some oil out of the ground and ship it off somewhere and they'll deal with it. Can Canada afford to do that? And when you look at some of these emerging economies, whether it's China, Brazil, India, hardworking people who will say, and not getting into any of the integrity issues with respect to patents and such, but they're hardworking and they're going to be manufacturing and making a real product. And so is that a requirement? Because as you said earlier, when it comes to IT, people can be living in Calgary, they can be living in the Bahamas and very easily produce the same kind of output. So what is going to drive, you know, Canada? What's going to drive Calgary specifically? And I if I haven't tipped my hand yet, I think we need to get back to something where we're actually producing something, because there's always going to be requirement to produce.
Well, okay, so you say that then, Gerri. So are there other resources other than oil and other than gas?
Well, I think there are. Like our business, we focus a lot on the industrial sectors, and so mining is a big part of it. So Fort McMurray, in large part, is a mining operation. They mine oil out of the ground. But then there's hard rock mining. And so there's a lot of that. And Canada is known around the world to be an expert in mining. And so that kind of industry can continue. But then what do you do beyond that? So lithium, we were talking about lithium off air. So now you mine this lithium, well, then what? And I'm not suggesting that we're going to be really getting into second and, you know, tertiary and such manufacturing beyond that. But we need to at least be doing the primary manufacturing, mining and such, and then any other kind of manufacturing they can do beyond that is important, I think. So it's not just oil and gas, I agree. What else is it? Is it more of that hard rock mining, whether it's lithium or copper or gold, whatever?
Well, the lithium, it's a byproduct, I think, of the brine that's from the oil development. So that is interesting to me. I don't think it's a big winner, maybe. It's just starting, but it was interesting because of how, you know, electric cars, the demand for batteries and all that is coming to fruition, right? So you wonder, gee, that's not a bad idea. They're not yet mining it because it is a metal, but there's hydrogen, there's helium, there's all kinds of things. So I mean, is there something we haven't exploited? And we've exploited the oil, the gas, and we continue to need to, I think. You're right. Now, are we at the end of that curve where we're not going to be exploiting as high of a rate? And I don't know.
And I agree. I think we can't just say we can't exploit our natural resources. So I think we all have an impact on the environment. I know there's environmentalists out there, and we need to be doing environmental impact assessments. All of that is understood. Having said that, I think we have to take advantage of some of our natural resources. My point is that, okay, well, what, in addition to that, what you're saying is like, what else beyond oil and gas? But then what else beyond that? What other manufacturing or other tertiary, not necessarily tertiary, but what other industries should we really be focusing on as a country, as a city, as a province, as a country, to make sure that we are positioned globally in a positive way? Because right now, I fear that, and I'll fold the States into this now, when I look at the U.S. and Canada as an economy, I don't think we're going to be in a good position, let's say 50 years from now, when you compare it to what even the European Union, China, Brazil, India. I don't think we're going to be in a good position.
Are we looking for a province that's going to attract a large company to set up here? Because they might set up little areas, set up warehouses, they might set up offices, but to what level do we need?
It's economics, right? Like why would a company come to Calgary? And part of it is going to be it's inexpensive to be here. The tax environment's good. The business environment's good, and you can develop. Like if Amazon's building this server environment out north, why? There must be some good thing. Like maybe they got an amazing deal on land, or taxes are good, or something. So that's a big win for us. Like that sort of thing. But I don't know if that's, like you said, that's not really, we're going to attract all the world's server environment. Like it's not it's more like you need to attract hundreds of businesses here. Like what will happen eventually is the owners of buildings are going to start to go broke. They're going to start to lower the rent or the cost of renting a building in Calgary. And then in 2 years from now, someone in the UK is going to say, hey, we need to set up another office away from here. Where should we go? Someone will do a list, and then they'll say, hey, look, Calgary's rent is $3 a square foot now. Well, let's go to Calgary. There's lots of room. And they'll go to Calgary. And that's what it'll be. And it's pure economics. You got to lower the cost of something that people want to the point that people will pay it. And then people flood in, and then demand drives it back up. It's that S curve you were talking
about. But people flood in. I think the question is, what type of people now? Because it's changed. So the office, we've got free office space. Pretty much. Yeah. So why aren't we filling free office space? Because people don't need to be in offices, maybe. And that's being determined right now. They're trying to figure that out, okay? And I don't think they've completely figured it out, but do we need manufacturing space? Well, we're not going to use offices, I don't think, for that, but maybe it's some type of different manufacturing that we can use an office for it. So then there's going to be a demand for that space. So or is it the homeless? Is it, shelter? What type of people are we going to attract? So it's not going to be that office necessarily. Maybe they are going to work from their offices. CEOs, maybe they work from their homes, I'm sorry. Yeah. So...
Well, in Vancouver's office space, they're full.
Right.
And when it's full, the price just goes up. Ours is coming down. So if you're in Vancouver and saying, hey, we can't afford Vancouver anymore, can we afford to do this same business, whatever it is, in Calgary? And then suddenly Calgary becomes affordable. Eventually. And, this is pure hyperbole, but eventually, if we don't fill up that space, it'll become so cheap. It'll be cheaper to run a business that was in India in Calgary because it'll be free, literally free.
So the other thing is you have to look at demographics. Mm-hmm. What type of demographic is driving that workforce, I think?
Yeah.
So is it the baby boomer? If that's the case, well, why do I want to go to Calgary? I'm going to retire in a few years, and I don't know if I want to be in Calgary to retire. I like the weather more on the western seaboard. I know it's more expensive, but, maybe we'll look at alternatives. So I think the demographic drives that workforce. And the younger children, younger kids, you'd have to think, do they want to be in that?
You know, picking up on what you're saying, Craig, about hyperbole and just almost like driving, let's say, Calgary right into the ground in terms of, you know, so there is that part of it. And then the turnaround, say, okay, it's, hey, cheap. Okay, now there's maybe an economic reason to come to Calgary and set up shop. But then there's the people issue, you know, like, is there a workforce? And this is maybe up your alley, right? It's like, is there a workforce? Is there people who can actually do the work and educated, want to do the work, whatever that education level is? And so that's another thing that is difficult to kind of turn around like on a dime. And so when you have that critical mass, okay, hey, the city's vibrant, it's moving, and people want to move there, and then it drives the market up in terms of prices in every dimension. But then there's this vibrant workforce as well. And my fear is that if we, you know, as I was saying more globally, you know, as a city, a province, a country, if we don't really start to address this issue in that way, you know, are we going to be, you know, driving this down to a point where it's going to be rock bottom prices? And I know this is hyperbole, right? But you know, is it rock bottom prices? Is it people? We don't have the workforce to actually execute on something, and if we do want that workforce, it's going to take us a while.
Those are the inputs to the business inputs, really, and you know, it does take a long time. And one of the big factors that we, you know, in the staffing world, we you know, hit right face into is all of the oil and gas companies for years just had so much extra cash, and they were just, hey, you want to, we'll just move that guy from that company to this company, give him an extra 20 grand. And then it was like, oh, well, now we'll move him over here, an extra 20 and another 20. And suddenly we had people whose incomes had dramatically gone up. And that's just everyone, but it's a group. That's almost exactly the same group that found themselves unemployed, because suddenly all of the big engineering firms just kind of, they just poofed, right? So then, and then you know, you come to today and we say, hey, let's make Alberta this amazing capital of, you know, information technology and robotics and all this other stuff. But everyone that's here and trained today, just like you're saying, all these people have been trained in oil and gas. So, and you know, and they're not kids anymore. They've been doing oil and gas for 30, 40 years, some of them. And what are you going to say? Hey, so today we're going to build websites now. We're going to stop doing well servicing software. We're going to build a website to sell, you know, crochet stuff or whatever.
Well, so you guys make a good point about the workforce, and so I understand, though, like, I think it was it 2 years or a year ago that they've removed the degree in petroleum engineering here at the university. So that's a leading indicator on, well, who are we going to be developing here, and what do we need to develop? So the education side, you have to look at your technologist, you need to look at your degrees of who's going to be available.
Yeah, you know, and what's interesting about education is that we actually do have in Alberta a relatively vibrant educational environment, but it's not like over the top, because you can go to like Boston and New York and it's like university, like there's a university on every corner, whereas in Alberta it's certainly more controlled, but we have a pretty good educational environment here, and it'll take time to make that. It's a big wheel. It's going to take a long time to shift that.
Well, the ranking is pretty good here.
Yeah,
actually,
it is.
Here and Edmonton.
Yeah. We just have to be on top of what we're teaching, right? It's kind of what you're saying. You can't just keep teaching what, you know.
No, well, that's right. All of a sudden we need technologists, somebody in some department, and we haven't even developed anybody here. And all these companies are going to go to Queens, or they're going to go to Boston or the States, you know, for these people. So
Okay, so here's a funny story. I went to Boston Pizza with my daughter and son, and at the end of supper, the young girl, right, who is serving us, comes over and she goes, "Oh, should I bring over a machine?" And this is like, well, here we have all these are machines, and I had to old man joke, and I was like, yeah, maybe you can see if you have a cotton ginny in the back. And she just looked at me and it's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. So like the machinery changes.
Right.
So we have to stay on top of it. But Yeah, I think Alberta's positioned reasonably well to have opportunity, but I don't think we've figured out at all what it's going to be. Not even close. So it'll be interesting if we do.
You know, Tom, you said we rank well in education, and I'm going a little further afield here, but it just got me wondering about, well, what do you mean by that, Tom? We rank well. We rank well against what? Against Harvard, against MIT, UCLA. You know, these, and some of these universities, they attract. When you say build it and they'll come, they attract people for their name. Some of them attract for, Jesus, this is a really heavy sports school. They bring in a lot of dollars in sports, and then they can afford to have, you know, pay the profs and whatever. And so in Canada, we don't really have that. And so then it's a question of, well, when we're saying we rank well, what are we ranking well to, and who measures that? And I realize there's issues around that. But I'm using that as a way to kind of get back to say, well, build it and they will come. And what's going to drive it? What's going to drive our educational system so that we are a destination? Or what's going to drive Calgary so it's a destination? And I guess I look at Calgary, Canada in generally, and I think it's kind of just there. It's not really, really great, and it's not really, really bad. It's just kind of there.
And we're apologetic for that.
Yeah, and you know, so it's like, well, it's our medical system, it's our educational system. It's good. It's not great, but it's good. And so is that going to be good enough moving forward? Whether it's our education, our health, our city, our economy, because we in my view, we've been able to get away with that because we've been partners and neighbors to a country that has been driving the world economy for so long. And I don't see that happening in the future. You know, not tomorrow, but 100 years from now or whatever it is. Is that going to be the case? I suspect not.
Well, and you can look at, sometimes, it's oversimplification dramatically, but the USA is a consumer largely. They have their domestic product versus their exports, or they're probably more of an importer generally. But Canada, when you look at Canada and you kind of like apply similar sort of thinking, we just have all this stuff in the ground, and basically we exist to get rid of that stuff. We don't really have a ridiculous agricultural environment because we just don't have enough sun. Like it doesn't last. We don't get 2 crops a year from our crops,
right,
like they do in the States. So, like you're right. Like, what are we going to be? Where's our thing? And I think there's a lot of thinking right now that says, well, look, you just have to be environmentally conscious and not do stuff. But then why are we here? There won't be a reason. Like if someone says to the hot dog cart guys, look, hey, no one's going to eat hot dogs anymore. You just have to stand on the corner and just stay there. But like, what's our hot dog? Like, we need something to add value. We need a gross domestic product. And like, if we can't attract, like, I don't know where we're at for car manufacturing anymore, but we used to have car manufacturing. It was a pretty big deal. I think it's faded dramatically and it's moved to other places. I think people buy our cattle. I think people buy some of our wheat. They certainly buy our oil and coal. But then if we're going to say, hey, we're not going to do cows anymore. Cows are over. Okay, well, that's one entire economy gone. We're not going to do oil. That's all we do. Like sooner or later, we're going to have a reckoning, right? And there just won't be a product to sell.
Yeah, and I've seen, going up to Edmonton lots, I've seen the agriculture industry. You look out and you see the fields and how they're coming along, and are they being harvested? They've been hit actually hard in some ways, but the commodity prices are very good.
Are they?
Very good. I mean, amazingly good. I remember when I was on the farm, oh my goodness, like $1.50 a bushel of wheat. Today, what is it? 14?
Is it really? Wow.
12, 13. It's high. It's up there. And, but, so can we take advantage of certain commodities that are out there? Mm-hmm. Can we grow coffee? No.
Yeah.
It's not going to work. We don't have the environment.
My banana tree is dead.
Right. So you eat a lot of bananas, I heard, though.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Unstoppable.
Really good potassium, by the way. I'm not sure if you knew that,
I
Craig.
cramp too much.
So it's a matter of understanding commodities that you can develop and sell, right? Well, not develop, but I mean sell too in the marketplace. And I don't know. That's a good question. What is our hot dog?
Yeah.
You know, I'm gonna throw a curveball at you guys because I am typically pro business. I'm on the right. I'm like industry. Let's make this happen. But when you said that, when you were saying that, Tom, I was wondering about sustainability and are our practices sustainable? And so I don't know if you guys have seen some of these documentaries like Food Inc. and how the industry of food is very much a business. And so this whole idea of Roundup, so for example, making some of these seeds, whether it's soy or whatever, resistant to Roundup. So now you pour all this Roundup on there, and hey, all of a sudden this soy plant grows. And so does that make sense? Yes. Hey, I understand the logic behind it, but is it sustainable long term for our environment? And I'm not this tree hugging environmentalist. I'm not that kind of person, but I do wonder about sustainability. So when we look at whether it's agriculture or whatever it is, do we have a balanced perspective? And I guess the question then is can we even afford to have that perspective? Because now when we look at countries like China or other countries like that, they're just producing product. Who cares about pollution? Who cares about this? And so there's this, and I'm wondering if there's an opportunity to, like, for example, you see organic. One of my friends, he's got a farm and he's producing organic product and he's making a business out of it. And so is there an opportunity for, on a bigger scale, take that on a bigger scale now, to have a sustainable or have sustainable practices that will be economic? And so I kind of wonder about that, and take that in agriculture or take that further afield. I think it's an interesting thing that we have to reconcile as a city, as a country, as a globe, I guess.
Well, look at microbreweries, how they've come along here in Calgary.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Well, even throughout Canada, I would imagine, but it's not something I've stayed on top of, but I've heard but it's microbreweries. It's small. Is it big enough, right? That's the question. Is it a big enough ball that can get rolling?
And then the challenge is always, like at the economic level, is it sustainable from the standpoint of, can you move it to the U.S.? Can you move your entire operation to the U.S. and you make twice as much money because the environment is such that business is supported differently? So we have to encourage that business to start here and stay here. So otherwise it doesn't make sense to stick around.
But also look for, like you're saying, more clients in a population base that's 10 times us.
Yeah.
And you have to have a product that can do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Canada's been pretty good at innovating a lot of things, which is, I don't think that's a sustainable business model, but we have been good at innovating. So we built the Canadarm. There's one thing. You guys each have to come up with one now.
Yeah, come on.
How about my arm?
Come on, Tom.
See that?
Can-do reactor. Eh?
There you go.
And Tom's arm. Yeah.
Yeah, we're big into nuclear.
Yeah. And we could blow it up nuclear-wise. Like we could, that's funny.
That's clean. It's clean energy.
It's clean energy, and the technology is there to, where Canada could be an absolute leader in the nuclear reactor environment. So, and how many nuclear reactors do we have in Alberta? One. Tiny little one at the U of A. Okay. And it just puts out medical isotopes, and that's it. And we have a massive field of uranium and plutonium up in northern BC, or Alberta, Saskatchewan.
Okay.
So, and all the technology to use it.
Yeah, so what drives that? Because recently, in the last 6 months, there's been discussion about having these smaller nuclear plants. And so what's stopping us? And so part of me thinks that, I may sound like I'm sucking and blowing at the same time, because although I'm conscious about our environment, I also don't think that can be the be all and end all And so is our environmental issues the issues that are driving and saying, well, no, we can't do nuclear, obviously, for this reason. Have these little micro nuclear plants throughout the country. Economically, I think it makes a lot of sense. It's clean, you're saying it's clean energy, and I'm sure we could figure out a way to produce that energy economically. But why aren't we then? And so
Fear.
Yeah. Chernobyl.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's
still.
Yeah.
But that in itself.
Not that it's a good reason. I agree. Yeah. I think. You have to understand the environment and the impacts on it. I totally get that. I think it's gone to a point where, we're too far, and it's stopping us from moving forward to a certain extent. And if you look at solar energy, you look at those types of energies, it's very, very expensive.
Oh, yeah.
To do, and it's not going to happen that quickly here. It isn't. And
and certainly not at a viable level. It's
right.
a novelty level, most solar and wind power. Like, I think we had a huge miss with coal where we just abandoned this massive amount of energy that Alberta has. We own it.
Yes.
And instead of saying, let's dump billions into being the best coal generating environment in the world where we can kick out a zero carbon sort of gigawatt. Now we won't do that. And we're still burning coal. We're just sending it to China. It's just being burned over there.
It was so political, I think, though.
Yeah.
I think that was such a political
yeah.
play, and so you're right. It wasn't technically, I don't think, looked at and focused on.
But politically, it's a big win.
Yeah.
It sounds great.
Yeah.
Well, we could have dumped an awful lot of money into that.
Could have been our hot dog, coal hot dogs.
Yeah. Like it is an industry like where we could be the specialist in providing electrical power to the world. Like, we're not going to generate it here, but we could have all that technology of going to China and saying, okay, you have 600 coal-fired plants. We're going to make them better.
Well, isn't the States huge into coal?
Oh, yeah. Coal, and they have nuclear as well.
Their neighbor.
Yeah.
And could we have created this technology from our universities, from our,
Yeah.
Gerri, you're smiling.
I have no facts to support this, but when we talk about whatever it is, whether it's pipelines or a mine or whatever the case, there is invariably an environmental contingent that is protesting against it. And a while back, there was someone who made mention, and I can't remember if I looked it up on a website or not, but there was talk about some U.S.-based companies supporting that lobby group so that they would lobby against that project and therefore benefit that U.S.-based company. And again, I can't say that happened for sure, but if it did, it wouldn't surprise me. And so then I start to wonder whether it happened or not. I wonder if we're looking at things objectively, and say, hey, we need to consider the environment, but we also need to consider the economy and the technology and how this is going to impact our psyche as a country. And so whether it ends up being a coal hot dog or whatever that ends up being, I don't think that we look at this as a country, and I'm not going to get on one side of the political spectrum or the other, but as a country, I don't think we look at this in a very measured way.
Okay,
way.
I like how you said measure, because that's right where I was going to hit. I thought, well, okay, we've got these special interest groups that all of a sudden, no, and that's what we hear on the news. So what about all the people that are for it? How do we compare? Why don't we just take a vote all of a sudden? Why don't we do that? Now, all the people that are for it, they're not on the news. They're not on promoting or for it. I mean, I've seen some of that with the oil and gas. Finally, some people said, no, we're going on and we're going to promote this because this is part of our culture. This is who we are. So they've had enough. But So measured, I like that because that gives you results. You have to have something measurable in order to see if there's results that are favorable or not. So,
You know, if someone throws up a red flag, I'm okay with that.
Sure.
If it makes us better. But if it just shuts it down, like if, you know,
it's
if,
not
like
a stop.
yeah, like if you
Like-
go to a football game and the red flag goes up and then everyone's just, oh, we're out. That's it. The game's over. One flag, we're out. And there's no football.
That's
right?
what
Like,
I'm getting at.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Measured.
measured.
Yeah. I had he was a geophysicist and he was in here one time. We were talking about, he was a real specialist in, you know, tight gas and, you know, in particular, he dealt a lot with natural gas. And he said, the way it's going, Canada and specifically Alberta will be the only place on the planet with natural gas in the future. Everyone else, it'll all be gone and we'll have it all because we can't get rid of it.
Right.
So it's like, well, it's just here. It's cheap. No one really wants it.
So Craig, looking at that, we're sitting on oil reserves, natural gas in this case. We're also sitting on a bunch of water. And so is that our hot dog? Because you look at some of these cities, just in the States, look at some of these cities in the States, and it's becoming a grave issue.
Yeah.
A commodity that's becoming very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like high
I
demand.
don't know. I guess my gut and water is that, you know, when you look at, you know, Canada out over, you know, you take a 50,000 year perspective, right? Calgary was covered by a mile of ice. It's gone. Like now there's a sliver of glaciers that feed pretty much everything we're dealing with now. I don't think we can depend on that because that's not going to be there in, well, certainly, let's say 1,000 years. That's gone until the next ice age comes around and it reloads, right? So the technology needs to be, where are we going to get the water? Like if it's not coming from the glacier, because the glacier will be gone at some point, then it's going to come from salt water, and we need to really up the ability to take salt out of water. So that's a big deal, because otherwise the planet dies. Because if you can't supply water, and the amount that we use is obscene, and there won't be as much fresh water going forward. It's just the nature. Actually, what's interesting though, there's a bit of a side twist. My geologist friend, he was saying, when you look at Alberta, let's say, we have all these areas that are now treed, but if you went back several hundreds of years, right, and the further you go back, the less treed those areas are. So like the area in Banff, he said, this entire Banff Valley used to be grassland, and now it's trees.
Wow.
And so then when you look at it from a meteorological perspective, what happens is trees is where all of the clouds start to form, because all of the moisture comes out of the trees and goes straight up to the cloud and then forms clouds. So clouds just don't come from nowhere. They come from places that have humidity, which is what a tree is doing, is giving up humidity. It's kind of an interesting process.
How do you know that, Craig?
I don't know. I just make up most of it.
What the heck?
He's big into take in CO2 and give out oxygen.
Exhale.
Yeah.
That's how you lose weight, Gerri.
Well, yeah.
So let's totally change the topic, because we're like three old guys. And we have to go to the gym every day to keep ourselves looking this amazing.
Well, thank you for that, Craig. I was hoping you'd recognize
Acknowledge
that.
it.
Thank you.
Yeah. What's the big challenge? I think the world has changed, because and I've said this before, is like, you look at certainly our parents, but then definitely their parents. Working out was a big no-no. You don't do it. It's dangerous. It could kill you. And I've heard people say that. I have a friend who, their whole family, he was from the UK, said, if you get all hot and sweaty, you could die. Like it's that dangerous to work out. You got to be so careful. He wasn't particularly healthy.
As he smoked his Marlboro
Yeah.
cigarette.
No. Yeah. He was just,
man.
he liked to eat for sure. And so, but exercise was taboo. So, and suddenly we now have a whole population that, you even think back to, well, you guys are probably, you've been in the gym for your whole life, probably. Yeah. you think back 30 years ago, let's say, so we're into the 80s, 90s. How many gyms were there? Like, you'd have to drive across town to get to a gym, and there was the YMCA, and then there was one other gym. It was Thor's gym or BJ's gym, or, you know, and then the gyms start to, yeah, and then the gyms start to come up. Or it was like a university or high school gym.
Yeah.
And the gyms start to show up.
Yeah.
Today, Anytime Fitness, 24-hour fitness, Orange Theory,
F45,
F45,
yeah.
like,
Well, and
what the heck?
It's not just gyms. It's 24-hour gyms.
yeah.
Oh, you can come in anytime. Come on in. Okay.
So is the number of people who work out dramatically higher per capita now? Or something's happened?
No, you know, I say no right away. It's just a feeling I have. I don't have statistics.
Well, I would agree with you. I don't know if it's different, and I think it's not just the gym. I think it ties in with other things. Like, for example, back in the day when you were saying, "Hey, McDonald's, got to go to McDonald's, Ronald McDonald, and eat your fries," and nowadays when you look at these companies, whether it's McDonald's or whatever, and whether they're you think they're doing a good job of it, they're at least sensitive to the fact that they can't just be selling burgers and fries. So they throw salads and things like that into their menu. And so I think it's interesting to me that our society back in the 70s, let's say, was, well, you got to smoke and you got to go to McDonald's and you got to do this and exercise. What are you talking about? That it's, just in the last 40 years.
We go bowling on Thursdays.
Is it building it and they'll come? Is that what it's about? A little bit?
I don't know.
Is
it? I think we could probably do some great sociological studies on it, but I feel like the crowd that works out has gotten older for sure. Like there's, like it would have been young people who played football and basketball, they'd work out. And then as you get older and have kids, you just kind of fade away into your lazy boy chair and watch TV for the rest of your life. But that's not happening now. I think the older crowd has really amped it up. And I don't know if, I don't want to sound sexist, but I feel like women working out is a significant change. And that's anecdotal, but I bet if we did a study, I would be right.
You mean more?
Increase.
This is a dramatic increase.
I think so too. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I think also you look on TV and you see these challenges, these shows that are related to exercise or physical fitness, and it's interesting. I mean, The Rock, he had one. There's all kinds of this, and I get interested. I think now, is it sustainable? Do they stay or not? It takes discipline, right? As you know, Craig, you've taken it to the next level, obviously.
There's still suffer more up here.
So, but anyway.
But I look at, some of the older people in my life too, and I think, like, they have a hard time moving now, right? So you hit 80, and it's our parents' generation, and, my grandparents are long gone, but it's my parents' generation now, and they hit 80, and it's like getting from the front door to the back door, it's a process now. It's not, and getting out of the car to go somewhere, it's a process. Like, we have at the gym, I'll say his name is Jack, but like he's quite old at the gym, and that guy's, what is he, 80, mid-80s?
82 or 83.
Yeah. And he's doing sit-ups and like killing it at the gym.
Well, he walks to
He's going to last a long time.
Yeah, and so it's interesting because you look at your vehicle, you have to do maintenance. You have to do replacements of sort, whatever it is in your vehicle. And I think people, they are not educated on how to manage your body, which is number one. I mean, if you got a family, you're still number one. You better take care of yourself, because if you don't, you may not be around or whatever. You might be of ill health. So I learned that from a gentleman years back. We talked, and he said, I take care of myself. I'm number one. Not my wife, not my family, not anybody else. I have to be healthy. So I totally took that to heart. And I've worked with you, Craig, in different respects, and I've created new disciplines. And I think it's a discipline that everyone needs to understand. And I don't think people are educated enough, number one, on even just simple food consumption. They don't understand how that can make such a difference in your
Yeah.
ability to do something in a day. And you go, well, I don't care. I don't know. Why do I need to care about that? Well, you do care. You should, because number one, in a day, you could attract something different, something bigger, something more exciting. You could feel better. You could avoid a sickness. You could avoid an expensive sort. But long term, when you look at your muscular growth, I think that's where I think you're going to benefit a lot, because I see it in people in their 80s or 90s where they've got the inability maybe to move. They have the flexibility, and this can be detrimental, in simple overextension of an arm or a leg, or stepping up or stepping down, and all of a sudden
My hair brushing muscles are sore.
I have no hair left. So it's all of that I think, to me, and the only reason I say this is because I've educated myself more. I love listening to, and I think it's so important. Just go on YouTube, like 10 minutes every week. Just listen to something that's educational. You don't have to read a book.
And then, we worked through a show together.
Yeah.
You ended up doing a show which was, a good driver or a deadline or a goal for you.
Right.
So now, what do you do it for? Why are you there every day? What pushes you to show up at way too early in the morning in the cold?
Yeah, I think for me, it's this long-term view of making sure that I have a certain level of health, that I can not have that. You mentioned that fella's going to live a long time, and yes, people will live a long time, but what does their life look like? What kind of condition are they in? And so I don't want to have that slow death where I'm just basically crawling, and I've seen too much of that in my family, my grandparents and parents. So I'm doing it for that long-term play, to kind of stay healthy. And I think there's also a social aspect to it. There's, coming to the gym and seeing guys or gals, whatever, and working out. And so to me, it's just become part of the life and my life and its discipline. I guess I wanted to go back to what you were saying, Tom, you're saying, you've educated yourself. And I start to wonder, well, that's good for you. And that's good for us. Let's say, we're on board. But what percentage of the population do we think we're representing here? Because it's not high. I don't think, it's changing. I'm not saying it's not changing, but you look at the obesity that's going on in North America. Let's just leave it there, and the perspectives of how they should be looking at whether it's the gym or diet, whatever. And yes, there are some socioeconomic issues that come into play, and there's correlations there, but I think it's I think important for us to recognize that the general population is not, oh man, I'm concerned. I've got to do some research and find and do this so I can increase my quality of my life today and 50 years from now. I don't think that's out there.
Yeah, here's a crazy wraparound to the whole conversation. Really, is when you can, at a scientific level, take a look at how many calories on a per capita basis Americans, Canadians eat on a per capita basis. Actually, just a side note, if you go into The Economist, they put out a book every year that shows you world stats. Everyone always says, every comedian says, they get up on stage, most obese country in the world, United States of America. And it's not even close to the top. And I think the Middle East is way worse, and the Caribbean is pretty bad too. And so and then some other weird, I don't want to say any countries because then I'll get a phone call from the president or something. But it's not the US, which is interesting only. It is pretty bad. But the big wraparound is when you look at the food production industry and you think, okay, so you have 350 million people in the United States, and I work for a big food production company. Okay, how am I going to, and everyone eats 2,200 calories per day. Okay, my market is fixed, except you have immigration and new births, and the one other variable is motivate people to eat more.
Right.
So now if you eat 2,400 calories, multiply that by 350 million people, suddenly I can sell more. I just sell more calories. I'm just selling calories.
And you know, Craig, it's easier to eat more than to eat less, isn't it?
It's way easier.
It
makes life
way
better.
easier. And again, it's the word discipline is huge.
Yeah.
Some other podcast will go into that. However, you mentioned about education, Gerri. I thought that was a really good point. Immediately came to mind going for an annual checkup. That's always an interesting visit, I find, because it doesn't really educate me much. It doesn't really address health to me that in the way that it really should. I think you should have an annual checkup with some knowledge of, first of all, there's two things that I think every individual should do. Number one, download the app, MyFitnessPal.
Or some variation.
Download
but yeah,
variation,
there's lots of them. Yeah.
whatever. So, and track what you eat in a day, a week. Track your habit, because you all have habits. So just do that, number one. And that's what we did. That was number one. And so then number two would be, okay, I'm eating too much. I don't burn off that much, and I'm always in a surplus. Well, okay, what does that mean? What does a surplus mean? Well, that means I'm probably got too much, and it probably just stores it a little bit every day, every week, every month. Okay, well, here's your challenge. Everyone should do this, is try to lose 10 pounds, okay, or 5 pounds. Let's say 5 pounds. Try to lose that in a month. Mm-hmm. No, that's not that easy. So let's say 2 months. I don't care. Let's go 2 months. So lose 5 pounds. There you go. And understand your body. You got to get educated about your body. I mean, I think it's so important. And those are just two things. I think you could go, I didn't understand macros. I didn't understand micros. I didn't understand what it does. I didn't even understand this whole calorie thing. It's just, I want to title a book, It's Just Math. Mm-hmm. Honestly.
Tom, I agree with you. But before I think you can get there, when we talk about the general population, I think there has to be the question of, well, one, this general awareness. Is this, what are you really talking about just at a high level? And then why? Why am I...
Healthcare, Gerri. I think it's healthcare, right?
No, I'm not arguing.
That's where I'm going. I
Yeah.
didn't finish my point. So I just want to say that I think this is a whole healthcare issue that we're trying to mask and we're being reactive rather than proactive. That's my point.
Well, and that launches me to an issue that I think is really challenging in that, from my perspective, our healthcare system, and I hope I don't offend people in the healthcare system, but unfortunately, I don't think it's a system of health. I don't think it's really in terms of saying, let's keep people healthy or let's get people healthy. I think it's our society and everything that we do, not just health, is where's the easy button? What can I do to push the easy button? So
Yeah.
I've got a headache, give me a pill. Mm-hmm. I need surgery, well, I need to have this issue, give me surgery.
I love this.
I have this.
Yeah.
And so, too much of our society, again, this isn't just health, it's so many things. It's like we are just so, easy button, or we propagate that idea of just tell me the easy way to do this. So I'm not going to, for example, I'm not going to exercise. I'm not going to take care of myself.
Right.
I'm going to smoke. I can do all this stuff. And I've got a problem. Well, hey, doctor, fix me. I've got the problem. That's why you're here. And yes, I guess that's part of why they're there. But really, we all have to own part of that as well before we get to that point.
Right.
And so our system, the way that we're set up as a society, it's not set up to be a true health care system.
Yeah. No one, and then the part that is very expensive.
Yes.
Because you can hire a team of people behind you.
Yeah.
You can hire me. I'll stand behind you and tell you what to eat. But it's really expensive, and it's not part of our psyche or anything. And you know what's you kind of got me to think. There's a really good stat, and it's online. Anyone can find it. Is the correlation between longevity and the number of calories you eat. and it's very highly correlated. So the longer you live is, and it's not, you know, if you eat 0 calories, you're not going to live for 1,000 years. Like there's definitely a balance, but high calorie diets don't lead to longevity. That's the takeaway.
Well, it's interesting because you mentioned that, and I remember just hearing on a short YouTube video something about how building muscle gives off a certain hormone that encourages longevity. So that was interesting, I thought. But then I'll just leave that point with the fact, well, maybe it's not about longevity. Maybe it's about experiencing amazing experiences every day. Maybe it's not living to 120 like I've said over and over. I want to live to 120. But
not interested. I'm out. I'm not living that long.
Okay.
There's no way.
I think to your point though, you know, what I'm interested in my life is to really have a situation where I'm living fairly in a fairly healthy way. I can take care of myself, and then I die.
Yep.
I don't want to be in that situation.
Do you remember Logan's Run, the movie?
Yeah.
Man, you have to go back a long ways.
Well, I don't want to be that, you know, because I kind of alluded to it earlier. Like I've seen it where, you know, like people decline, they don't take care of themselves, they decline, and they just a slow death.
Yeah.
And
you have to poke them.
Yeah. And
are you still going there?
Exactly.
Gerri?
Can I just be the guy that pushes you out in front of the
yes, you can.
train?
Yes, you can.
Yeah, we'll be on the. Oh, hi Gerri, how you doing? How old are you? Well, you wanted to live till 80. You're at 85. Oh,
Done.
I'm just gonna pat you on the back.
Yeah, but to your point, Tom, like I think it's not. I don't think it's 120 or 90 or whatever it is. I think it's quality.
Yeah.
And if I'm 88 and the quality is no longer there, then put me out.
I think there's an interesting component to it where, you know, there's the quality of being able to move around, like the being mobile,
Right.
is such a big deal, and I see it so much with some of the older people in my life. But you know, maybe you get to a point in life and it's just, you know, like, hey, I'm 95 years old. I probably have 5 more years. I'm going to eat cake 3 meals a day and drink vodka on every meal. And I don't care anymore. And that's good too. Why not? As long as you can enjoy it and live through it. But yeah, I think we get a little bit too myopic on use the word good. All your food has to be good. And then you end up at 85 and you're not very happy anymore. So you got to eat.
Yeah.
There's some happiness that comes from food. So, yeah. But listen, hey, we're out of time. We got to wrap this thing up. We have lives to deal with, lives and kids and family. So, but hey, wonderful having you guys. Hopefully we can do this again.
Thanks, Craig.
We'll get more topical and tropical. Maybe we'll go do this somewhere warm.
Wow.
And we'll talk about something more specific and more interesting as we go. So, but thanks for your time. Thanks for coming, guys.
Thanks a lot, Craig. I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was terrific. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.